if I was a swearing man, I'd say, what in the world is going on here? This is a muddy tire. That is approximately how deep the tire decided to sink into the mud. And now there's some 2x6s there. Kind of. You can see the jiggle. That means water. Look at how wiggly that is!
That is saturation.
That's amazing. So that's why the van looks like that.
Moral of the story, don't go off the trail.
Oh yeah, and let's reminisce upon a better time of when we used products and things or old things that were on the job site to serve a purpose. Remember when we closed off the HVAC holes with that nice board? Well, we're gonna put some use to that floor. All right, you want to see if it works? All right, here's a quick rundown. Upon beginning to deal with the joists and leveling the floor in preparation of cabinetry, because cabinets you need somewhat level floors, otherwise you end up cutting your cabinets, planing, and all that kind of stuff to conform to the floor so you have level cabinets. However, when you're dealing with a 2.5 inch discrepancy, it becomes very noticeable if you start messing around with cabinetry with that much. So what we have over here is as I began to place in my very first joist, acting as a rim joist, realized that we were a good couple inches higher than we needed to be, so we would end up having like some sort of a 2-inch step down going into the bathroom. That's a trip hazard waiting to happen. So I just took up both layers, both the hardwood layer and the subfloor layer, and brought it down to the joists, which actually turned out to be an easier removal because just a few cuts of the saw and a few prying down of the big pry bar, and these chunks come up actually really easily because there's these smooth shank old square nails holding it down, so it came up actually really easily. It was easier to take it up like that than it was to try to pull up each individual strip of hardwood flooring, 2.25 by 3/4 inch thick, you know. Anyways, long story short, I ended up getting to this portion of the floor and realized that there was concrete underneath here, and that by pulling up just that single 3/4 inch hardwood floor layer, I'll show you. Right. Well, here's the example right here. This one's got the shims. By pulling up just this 3/4 inch layer, this next layer was just floating on these shims out over that concrete. And so while I tried to pull these up, well, then these started coming up with it. The whole floor was pulling up underneath me, so that consequently I had to pull the whole thing up, which was actually easier in the first place also. So start from square one. It's not a bad thing because there's a lot of level issues going on in here. It's going to be easier actually to deal with it when dealing with just joists instead of having the flooring in part way and just kind of trying to fudge and match and things like that. So that's what we're doing. All right, I've begun the process of putting some joists in here. What I have here is, as I mentioned at some other point, I have partial joists spanning the area where the rotted joists had to be cut off. I tied it back to a point which will actually be carried by an additional beam. The old beam here is just kind of acting as a temporary support, and then a new beam is going to be going in adjacent, carrying this end so that there's no hinge point, so to speak. They're tied into that joist back there, but you can see how there's things going on there. This joist is higher than the original beam there. I didn't run that joist all the way through because partly there's lots of things going on. This stud here is actually a load-bearing stud, a load-bearing wall, even though we're missing studs there. Well, it's suffered because of that, because of those studs having rotted out. So anyways, having to deal with the slope in this room has proved to be very, very challenging. What I have here is, actually you'll see here, a notable difference here is about 1.25 inches on this joist higher than the original beam, which actually when you lead it over to here to where the bathroom comes in, we have approximately an inch here, which will be reconciled when I run in the new subfloor, and then also the 1/4 inch or 3/16 inch underlayment, and then the new sheet vinyl if that's the flooring of choice. Either that, or it could be subfloor and then the 5/16 laminate if that's the flooring of choice. Either way, then we'll end up with an almost flush or a flush floor seam and floor joint. And I did the same thing going into the bedroom. That'll be the same thing where we'll be flush. The compromise in this is that in order to get that, we had to run downhill. We had to run and leave about almost an inch of slope from there to here, a 13-inch run. And the reason why that is because this other primary joist that I'm pointing at right there, which leads into the dining room there, that joist is representing a floor plane upon which the majority of the cabinets will be installed, as well as the refrigerator, a major refrigerator. And now we look over here. Well, yeah, aren't there going to be cabinets over here? Well, yes, there are, but it's actually going to be a slightly shorter run of cabinetry so as to be a little less noticeable in regard to slope and having to plane the bottoms of the cabinets to get them in level on an unlevel floor. And not only that, it's just the way things worked out. The compromise was that actually going into the dining room will have a slight step up from the kitchen floor. So you might be noticing I've got string lines here and there. The string lines are aiding me in finding or giving me a reference point so I can bring all of my joists up to each string line. You'll notice down here too that I actually raised this side higher than that original beam. And the reason why I did that, for two reasons: to get flush into our new bedroom, as well as reduce some of the slope that is actually evident on this end of the kitchen. From that point over to this point, we had downward slope as well, not just on that end of the kitchen, going that way. Here's one of the challenges on that, is that each joist on this end is notched into this beam. You can see how it's going like that. Okay, well, if I raise it up, what's going to hold it? Well, you'd say, well, maybe you should put some joist hangers in. That would be ideal, except that there's just missing wood. There's other notches there. It's just going to make putting a joist hanger in less than ideal. You can see there's concrete here. I could break it out, but what I decided to do is actually go down to the original foundation and actually build up with green treated and then appropriate shims from there to be an independent support on each joist, as well as doing a little bit of work under the beam, because you can see there's actually a void under the beam. We want that beam to remain true. We want that to remain integral. So I have to build a little bit of shimming underneath that as well. Whew! That's a mouthful. So there you have it. I think that's it for now.
I'm on.
You're on already?
Here goes nothing.
We keep the door open because it's fun.